The Deed. A story for the quiet drama. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't show up on any chart. It doesn't register on a monitor. It doesn't have a code you can bill to insurance. It lives somewhere behind the sternum, in the place where a person keeps everything they haven't said yet. I know that place well. I lived there for 3 years. My name is Marin Calloway. I am a registered nurse. I work 12-hour shifts in a cardiac unit, and I have held the hands of strangers at the worst moments of their lives. I have learned in that work to stay calm, to read a room, to know when something is wrong before anyone else in the room will admit it. I should have used those skills sooner at home. But love makes you want to believe. It makes you reframe things. It makes you tell yourself that the woman who calls you, the girl my son married, at family dinners is just adjusting. That the husband who laughs along with her instead of correcting her is just keeping the peace. That the apartment you purchased with your own savings, in your own name, before you even met your husband, is still yours, even when someone starts treating it like a favor they did you. It took my daughter to make me see it clearly. Her name is Ivy. She was 4 years old when this story ends, and she was the reason I finally stopped being quiet. Let me tell you how it started. I bought my apartment when I was 26. A one-bedroom on the second floor of a pale yellow building on Sycamore Glen Drive in a suburb called Harlow Falls. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen tiles were slightly uneven, and the bathroom faucet took 15 seconds to run warm. But I had saved for 2 years, worked extra shifts, eaten lunch at my desk. And the day I signed that deed, I sat in my empty living room on the floor and cried in the way that only feels right when something is truly, finally yours. I met Daniel Whitmore 8 months later. He was kind at first, attentive. He brought coffee to my unit once when I mentioned I hadn't slept. He remembered small things, the name of the author I liked, the way I took my tea. I fell in love with the version of him that paid attention. We dated for a year. Got engaged. Got married in a small ceremony at a botanical garden 20 minutes outside of Harlow Falls, with 40 people and my grandmother's ring on my finger. His mother, Renata Whitmore, stood in the front row in a cream dress and did not smile once during the ceremony. I told myself it was nerves. We moved into my apartment together after the wedding. Daniel had been renting a room in a shared house, so it made practical sense. My name was on the deed. My savings had bought it. We agreed verbally over dinner the week before we married that we would eventually sell it and buy something larger together once we were ready. Renata did not like this arrangement. The first comment came 3 weeks after the wedding. We had her over for dinner, pasta, salad, garlic bread, the kind of meal you make when you're trying. She looked around the apartment with a slow, evaluating gaze and said, "It's small, isn't it, for a family?" I said we were comfortable. She said, "Daniel grew up in a 4-bedroom house." I passed her the bread and changed the subject. The second comment came a month later, on a Sunday phone call I was not supposed to hear. I was in the hallway, coming back from a run, and the front door was slightly open. I heard Daniel's voice, then Renata's through the speaker, and I heard her say, clearly and without hesitation, "She's living off your goodwill, Daniel. You know that apartment should be in both names by now." Daniel said, "Mom, it's fine." She said, "It's not fine. You're her husband. You have rights." He said, "I'll talk to her." He never talked to me. Ivy was born 14 months into our marriage. She arrived early, 36 weeks, small and furious, with a cry that the NICU nurses said they could hear from the hallway. I was terrified in a way I had never been terrified before, and I was also, in that terror, completely certain. Certain that I would do whatever this child needed. Certain that nothing that didn't matter would be allowed to take up space anymore. She came home after 11 days. Daniel held her carefully, like something he might break. Renata arrived the following afternoon with a casserole and a list of opinions about how the nursery should be arranged. I was still in my recovery clothes. I had not slept more than 90 minutes at a stretch in almost 2 weeks. I thanked her for the casserole and asked if she wouldn't mind coming back later in the week when I was more myself. She looked at Daniel. He looked at the floor. She stayed for 4 hours. The rent comment came when Ivy was 7 months old. I had just returned from a 12-hour shift. Daniel was home. He worked remotely in project management, flexible hours, and Renata had come over while I was at work, as she had started doing several times a week. I walked in to find her reorganizing my kitchen cabinets. I stood in the doorway. I was still in my scrubs. My feet hurt. "I moved the glasses to the upper left," she said, without turning around. "The way you had them made no sense." I set my bag down. I said, "Renata, I'd appreciate it if you didn't rearrange things without asking." She turned around then, looked at me with an expression I had seen before, patient, slightly pitying, the look you give someone who is being unreasonable without knowing it. She said, "Marin, I think it's time we talked about the finances." I said, "What finances?" She pulled out a chair at my kitchen table, and sat down. Daniel was in the living room. I could see him through the doorway. He did not move. She said, "Daniel has been contributing to this household for almost 2 years. He pays utilities. He buys groceries. He has invested in this space." She folded her hands. "It seems fair, given the equity situation, that some formal arrangement be made. A monthly contribution from you toward the shared cost of living here." I stared at her. She continued, "We're not asking for much, something modest. $500 a month, perhaps, to reflect Daniel's stake in the property." I said, "You want me to pay rent?" She said, "I want things to be equitable." I said, "In my own apartment." She said, "In the apartment that your husband also lives in, which he has no legal stake in, which I think you'll agree is an unusual situation." I looked at Daniel. He looked at the table. He said, "She has a point, Marin. It's a little unbalanced." I didn't argue. I want you to understand that. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry, not in front of them. I said, "I need to feed Ivy." And I walked to the nursery and I closed the door and I stood there in the quiet with my daughter in my arms and I thought about that word. Equitable. I thought about the 2 years I had saved, the extra shifts, the lunch at my desk, the 15 seconds waiting for warm water in a bathroom that was mine. I thought about the deed with my name on it, sitting in a fireproof box at the back of my closet. I thought about what it meant that my husband, in my apartment, at my kitchen table, in a chair his mother had pulled out, had looked at the table instead of at me. And I made a decision. I was not going to argue. I was not going to explain myself. I was not going to justify the purchase I had made at 26 years old, before I had ever heard the name Daniel Whitmore. I was going to let them keep going, and I was going to be ready. Over the next 4 weeks, the pressure increased. Renata began referring to the arrangement as if it had been agreed upon. She mentioned it to Daniel's aunt at a family gathering, loudly enough for me to hear, saying, "They're still sorting out the financials, but Marin has agreed to make it more equitable." She sent Daniel a text, which he showed me with an expression that suggested I was supposed to find it reasonable, outlining a proposed household contribution schedule starting at $500 and increasing annually with inflation. Daniel said, "I think she just wants things to feel fair." I said, "Okay." He seemed surprised I didn't fight it. He said, "So you'll consider it?" I said, "I'll think about it." I was thinking about something else entirely. I called my attorney on a Tuesday morning between a 6 a.m. shift handoff and Ivy's 9 o'clock pediatric checkup. Her name was Patricia Osei, and she had handled my property purchase 3 years earlier. I told her the situation. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Marin, do you understand what they're describing?" I said I thought I did. She said, "They are attempting to establish a financial claim to your property by creating a pattern of contribution and dependency. If Daniel pays utilities and groceries long enough, and if you accept payments that look like rent, it begins to look like a shared financial arrangement. In some cases, in some states, that matters." I said, "What do I need to do?" She said, "Nothing yet, just don't agree to anything in writing, and let me pull your deed." She called me back the next morning. She said, "Your deed is clean, Marin. Sole ownership, your name only, recorded before the marriage. In this state, that property is yours. There is no ambiguity. I said, good. She said, do you want to do something with that information? I said, not yet, but soon. The dinner was Renata's idea. She proposed it as a family conversation, her words, in a group text that included Daniel's Aunt Carol, his cousin Brett, and his older sister Joanna. She said she thought it would be good to have everyone together to discuss the household situation and make sure Maren and Daniel are set up for long-term stability. Daniel forwarded me the message and said, she means well. I said, I know. I confirmed I would be there. I arranged for my mother to watch Ivy. I called Patricia and told her the date. She said, do you want me there? I said, no, I just want the document. She emailed it to me that afternoon. I printed 2 copies. I put them in a manila envelope in my work bag, and I went to my shift and I took care of my patients, and I came home and I kissed my daughter goodnight, and I slept better than I had in months. The dinner was at Renata's house, a wide colonial on a cul-de-sac in Harlow Falls, the kind of house with a matching seasonal wreath and a welcome mat that said home in block letters. Daniel's Aunt Carol was already there when we arrived, and his sister Joanna and Brett, who was on his 2nd beer and seemed vaguely aware that something was happening but not sure what. Renata had cooked. She was a good cook. I ate the food and I was pleasant, and I asked Carol about her garden renovation, and I let Daniel refill my water glass, and I waited. The shift came after the main course, before dessert. Renata set down her fork. She looked around the table with the expression of a woman who had practiced this. She said, I'm glad we're all here. I think family should be involved when there are important conversations to be had, and I've asked you all here because I want everyone to understand the situation. She looked at me. She said, Maren, I think you're a good mother. I think you work hard. But I think you've been holding on to something that's causing tension in your marriage, and I think the loving thing, the fair thing, is to address it directly. Joanna nodded. Carol looked at her napkin. Renata said, Daniel has been living in that apartment for 2 years. He contributes to the household. He is your husband and the father of your child. And yet his name is not on the property. He has no security, no stake. She paused. I would like to ask you, in front of the people who love you both, to agree to add Daniel to the deed. Or, if you are not prepared to do that, to begin paying him a monthly sum that reflects his contribution to a home he has no ownership of. She sat back. The table was very quiet. Daniel looked at me. He had the expression of a man who both wanted this to happen and did not want to be the one responsible for it. Brett said, That seems reasonable. Carol said nothing. I reached into my bag. I took out the manila envelope. I opened it. I took out the 2 printed pages, the deed, recorded 3 years ago, notarized, stamped, entirely unambiguous, and I set 1 copy on the table in front of Renata and 1 copy in front of Daniel. I said, I'd like everyone to take a look at that. Renata looked down. She scanned the first few lines. She looked up. I said, that is the deed to the apartment on Sycamore Glen Drive. My name is on it. Only my name. It was purchased in full with my savings, before Daniel and I met, before we dated, before we married. It is my property legally in its entirety, and has been since I was 26 years old. I said it quietly. I want you to know that. I did not raise my voice. I did not perform anger. I spoke the way I have learned to speak in a cardiac unit when something is serious and needs to be understood, clearly, steadily, without drama. I said, I want to be respectful because this is Daniel's family and I have tried to be part of it, but I need to be honest about what has been happening. I looked at Renata. You have come into my home and rearranged my kitchen. You have described my ownership of my own property as inequitable. You have proposed, at my kitchen table in front of my husband, that I pay rent in my own apartment to correct a financial imbalance that does not exist. I paused. And Daniel sat at that table and said you had a point. Daniel opened his mouth. I looked at him. He closed it. I said, I have not agreed to any financial arrangement. I have not signed anything. I have not made any verbal commitment that could be construed as acknowledgement of a shared financial interest. I looked at Patricia's card in my hand. My attorney has reviewed the deed and confirms that the property is mine, without ambiguity, and that any claim to the contrary would not hold. Renata said, "Marin." I said, "I'm almost finished." She stopped. I said, "I love my daughter. I intend to remain her mother in a stable home. What that home looks like going forward is something Daniel and I need to decide together, privately, without an audience and without pressure." I folded my hands on the table. "But I will not be paying rent in my own apartment. That conversation is over." The table was silent. Brett had put down his beer. Joanna was looking at Daniel. Renata was looking at the deed. Carol very quietly said, "She's right, Renata." Daniel and I talked that night. It was a long conversation, the kind that starts in the kitchen and ends up on the floor of the hallway at 2 in the morning, because nobody wanted to be the first to suggest going to bed. It was painful. I will not tell you it wasn't. He said he hadn't realized how far it had gone. I said, "You sat at my table and said she had a point." He said, "I know." I said, "I need you to understand what that moment cost me." He said he understood. Whether he did or not, I am still deciding. We are in counseling now, not the performative kind, not the kind where you go twice and declare things fixed. The real kind, where a woman named Dr. Solis asks questions you don't want to answer and then waits. It is slow. It is uncomfortable. It is, I think, the most honest thing we have done together. Renata has not been to the apartment since the dinner. She sent a text 2 weeks later that said, "I hope you know I was only trying to protect my son." I read it. I set my phone down. I picked up Ivy, who was pulling at my sleeve with the particular urgency of a toddler who has found something interesting on the floor, and I took her to the window and showed her the garden, and she said, "F wower," and pointed at something that was probably a weed. I said, "Yes, flower." And that was enough. I think about the deed sometimes, when I am on shift and it is quiet and I have a moment to think. I think about the girl who saved for 2 years and ate lunch at her desk and waited 15 seconds for warm water and then sat on her empty floor and cried. She knew something. She knew that a thing earned with your own effort belongs to you in a way that cannot be handed over because someone else has decided it should be. She knew that quiet is not the same as weak. She knew that the right moment to speak is not always the loudest moment or the angriest one. Sometimes the right moment is after dessert, at a table full of people who assumed you would fold, when you reach into your bag and set down 2 pieces of paper and let them read. I am still her. I am also Ivy's mother, which is a larger and more consuming thing, and I am a nurse, which has taught me that the body tells the truth even when the mind is still negotiating. I am still in my apartment. My name is still on the deed. The kitchen tiles are still slightly uneven, and the bathroom faucet still takes 15 seconds to run warm. And sometimes at night, when Ivy has finally fallen asleep and the house is quiet, I sit in the living room and I do not perform anything for anyone. I just sit there, in something that is mine. The quiet drama, the quiet ones always have the loudest stories.